character do we have that would come to the table and make tough decisions?
Let me bring in Mayor Giuliani. John McCain says, talk about a backhanded compliment, that you did a great job of running New York after 9/11, but that it has very little...
Okay, thank you. John, that was very nice.
But it has very little to do with national security, and he also points out that you still have never visited Iraq. He's sitting right over there. Explain to him why...
Sure. Being mayor of New York City encompassed a lot more than just September 11, 2001. For 8 years, I had the safety and security of millions of people on my shoulders that I had to deal with, that I had to make decisions about. It's considered the second toughest job in the United States, and I had it under very difficult circumstances. So the first time being a crisis manager was not September 11, but of course I am the only one here who actually has had to face an Islamic terrorist attack right at the center of it, had to make decisions immediately about how to deal with it. And it gives a pretty good indication that I have the leadership ability to handle whatever terrorists may be throwing at us in the future. And also, with regard to foreign policy, I've negotiated with governments when I was in the Justice Department. I negotiated agreements on illegal immigration. I negotiated agreements on the movement of prisoners. I worked on a task force on terrorism back in the Ford administration in the 1970s. Some of my knowledge of terrorism goes back almost to the very beginning of when it started. In the Justice Department, I handled cases involving mostly organized crime and white-collar crime, but also involving terrorism. I was in contact with governments all over the world in that regard. I have also traveled 91 trips in the last 6 years to 35 different countries. And when I had to take a stand for my country, I knew how to take a stand for my country. I kept Arafat out of the UN 50 celebration. I threw him out of the UN 50 celebration. I kept Castro out of that celebration. And when a Saudi prince handed me a $10 million check and wanted me to use it as a criticism of American foreign policy, I handed that check back to him and told him what to do with it, because I understand the critical issues on which you have to stand up for your country. And as the mayor of New York, I have been involved in one way or another in just about every single foreign policy issue, because it just happens to be part of the DNA in New York that you're involved in foreign policy with the UN there.
Senator Thompson, there's kind of an interesting debate going on here, the question of foreign policy expertise, which you and Senator McCain got in the Senate, versus management and executive expertise that the other three fellows here have. Where do you come down on this? I suspect you like the Senate model.
Well, it's kind of interesting. My friend Mitt thinks expertise is important in all areas except national security. And of course, it is more important nowadays than it's ever been before. These are different times. We face different kinds of enemies, a more protracted conflict from radical Islam than a lot of people probably realize, and any of us would hope was the case, but it is, and it's important that we understand the world we live in. I'm not sure it has to do with the number of countries. I could add my countries to the list, and Pakistan, of course, and that part of the world, and others. But and I was on the Intelligence Committee, and I've met with our CIA officers in small, soundproof rooms in faraway places, talking about what was going on in that particular country. I was a Republican floor manager for the Homeland Security bill, which I like to think has helped somewhat us not have another 9/11. I was chairman of the Governmental Affairs Committee, which has proliferation jurisdiction among a lot of other things. So I think it is valuable. I disagree with my friend Mike here, not from missteps, which everyone can make, but when thinking of the first thing to say, or one of the main things to say with regard to our foreign policy, is that it's arrogant, and he's concerned about the attitude of the rest of the world, closing down Guantanamo because people will think better of us and bring those people apparently here, and which would give them rights that they don't have there and become a part of our judicial system, and lifting the embargo on Castro and things like that. I simply disagree in terms of the view of the world and the kind of world that we live in. And finally, I'd say that on the issue of endorsement, I'm not sure what you're referring to about the Clintons, but wasn't that Ted Kennedy at your bill signing ceremony for your health care plan? Didn't he endorse that?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'll rest my case on health care.
I want to move on to another subject, but I want to give a couple of people time to clean up here. You got a mention of you, Governor Huckabee. You start.
Well, on the Guantanamo
You have 1 minute.
issue, I felt we should keep it open until the court case had come down, indicating that there was no real substantive difference in whether they were in Guantanamo or Leavenworth, and I think that sort of changes the picture. The fact is, I don't care what the rest of the world thinks. I care what America thinks, and it's become a divisive issue. I went to Guantanamo. I visited it. Quite frankly, I visited every prison in my state. I know a little bit about the difference between what we operate and what we were operating in Guantanamo. It wasn't that it wasn't too bad. The truth is, it was too darn good. The conditions down there were amazingly hospitable. I thought a little bit too much for my taste, considering what these people had done. So it's a matter of believing that we ought to have policy that brings this country together, not tears it apart. I don't think where we keep these people is as important as it is that we keep them and we don't let them go.
They get certain rights if they come here. They could get habeas corpus rights by being physically here that they wouldn't otherwise get if they were in Guantanamo.
Well, the courts are in a case right now to decide whether or not that's going to be held.
As they are in Guantanamo. I mean, that's the assumption.
But what I'm saying is, if they're going to be the same in Leavenworth as Guantanamo, it shouldn't matter where they are geographically.
That's not the situation. It would be different if they were in Guantanamo. If they were in Leavenworth.
I want to move on to immigration, but first I want to give you, Senator McCain, a final minute. And also, before, in the last segment, I thought I heard you say you know how to get bin Laden. Is that true?
Sure.
How?
By giving us a human intelligence capability and by making it the top priority for all of the agencies of government and improving our intelligence capability dramatically, which is very badly needed right now. But I want to, since you mentioned my name about Senate versus governor, it's not an accident that I've received the endorsement of 4 former secretaries of state, Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, Larry Eagleburger, and Al Haig. It's not an accident that over 100 retired admirals and generals have endorsed my candidacy. But more important, it isn't my Senate experience that I rely on, Chris. It's my life experience. It's my time deprived of America when I really grew to love her. It's my experience in leading men and women into combat, certainly not into combat, leading men and women as a commanding officer of a squadron in the United States Navy, of having the life experiences that has given me an experience that has probably been more meaningful and more helpful to my service to this country than perhaps my time in the United States Senate.
All right. I want to move on to a subject that had a lot of sparks last night, and that is immigration. Senator McCain, I want to pick up with you because Governor Romney last night and has for some time attacked your immigration reform plan, McCain-Kennedy, as amnesty. And the fact is, while illegals would have to pay a fine, the vast majority would have gotten visas that would put them on the path to citizenship without ever having to leave the United States. Isn't that kind of guarantee a form of amnesty?
Well, first of all, the Z visa, as that Governor Romney refers to, was an earned right, not an automatic one. 2 million people that Secretary Chertoff has said are in this country illegally have to be rounded up and deported immediately. So certainly amnesty for all or even citizenship for all was not allowed. Second of all, you had to have a job. You had to go through the naturalization process. You had to pay a fine. You had to do many things. And during this debate and discussion, we talked about different, because it ended up not leaving the floor of the Senate, about this touchback provision for some. But look, we all know the debate has gone on about who wants, quote, amnesty, and of course I have never, ever supported amnesty and never will. But the point is, we've got to work together and move forward and solve this problem. Our borders are broken. We have to fix them, and that's our first priority. And as president, I will secure our borders, and I will have the governors of border states certify those borders are secure. Then we move on to the ways that we discussed last night, a temporary worker program that works, addressing the issue of the people who are here illegally in a humane fashion. I'm not interested in calling up a mother of a son or daughter who's fighting in Iraq and telling them, I'm not interested in calling the son or daughter in Iraq and telling them I'm deporting their mother. We've got to address this issue in a humane and compassionate fashion. We've got to have national security first, which means secure our borders, and then we move forward together on this issue. That's the way we're going to resolve the issue of illegal immigration in America. And American people want the border secured first, but Americans are compassionate and loving and caring people, and they will address it, I believe, in that fashion.
Governor?
We certainly are a compassionate and humane people, and we're also a people who believe in the rule of law.